This is Season 3 of Flute Unscripted. Hi, I'm Caity Massoud, and I sit down with a new artist every week and share their uncensored stories with you. This podcast is brought to you by Flute Center of New York, the marketplace for flutes. Join us, subscribe, rate and review us, and please stay tuned to the end of this episode for a special Flute Center of New York discount code for our podcast listeners. There are a lot of things that make Flutronix special. Allison Loggins-Hull and Nathalie Joachim are a flute duo changing the perception of what the flute can do and how it can sound through new compositions, exploration of genres, and use of electronic music. Together, Flutronix has released 4 albums, had collaborations and broadcasts around the world, and recently kicked off their 2-year residency at Carolina Performing Arts. Even separately, their solo projects are consistent with their overarching goals together. Nathalie is the new flutist with 8th Blackbird and working on Women of Haiti, a celebration of under-recognized female artists. Allison has most recently been brought on as faculty at Montclair and is involved in the Diametrically Composed project, featuring stories of artists that are also mothers. These 2 flutists also happen to be great friends, and it was such a treat to get to see them interact together. Thank you, Nathalie and Allison, for coming in today. It was a real pleasure to have you both. You're Flutronix. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having us. Yeah.
Oh, you're even speaking in tandem.
Yeah, I know.
It happens.
That's what happens almost 10 years later.
Yeah, you've been together for a while.
Yeah.
But you both independently have accomplished quite a lot. You're both very successful on your own. You have your own projects. Nathalie, you're an 8th Blackbird, and you're a composer interested in interdisciplinary arts. And Allison, your compositions have been commissioned for the Texas Flute Society. And you're also a composer, and you're at faculty at Montclair recently. Congrats on that.
Thanks, thank you.
Where did the idea for Flutronix come from? I know you 2 met kind of through mutual friends, and you bonded quickly, but where was the idea for the group?
Mm-hmm.
Well, we really met on the internet.
Yeah, we met on the internet, really.
But, I mean, I don't know. Honestly, there was no idea for the group. The group just happened. We had never met. We met on the internet, and then...
The first online date.
Yeah, honestly.
Yeah.
That's funny.
That was like, oh my God. Anyway, so we did. And so I went, and, kind of the first day we met, Allison invited me over to her house, and I just went over there, and we sat and talked for hours. I mean, I don't even know. In reality, I didn't even know. It was probably it was really actually many hours that we just sat.
And we talked about all kinds of things. It wasn't even really about flute. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It was just getting to know each other. And we just found that we were very like-minded. And we had some similar kind of experiences in this musical journey, you know, at that point, thus far. So we were just vibing out.
Yeah. And we sort of, it was just in a way, we met each other at the exact right moment in our lives. And we're both already kind of working in this way. And so just decided to continue that work together.
Is it hard to do things together because you are, living in different places and have very, very busy schedules? So is it hard to meet up and make the time? Do you guys have a deal with each other? We're going to do this many projects within this amount of time or per year? Mm-hmm. Is there a deal you have with each other like that?
Well, it was it was an interesting adjustment when I moved to Chicago. I do think actually it has resulted, it definitely has resulted in us working in a different way, but I feel actually in a much more productive way. Mm-hmm. We meet administratively several times a week just to go through kind of slogging through the business stuff between our publishing and just following up on projects and artistic planning, etc. Yeah,
emails.
And emails.
Wow.
So just kind of that happens very regularly. I think, not that dissimilar to, 8th Blackbird, we're all in the same city, and that we probably actually, maybe Flutronix meets even more than 8th Blackbird does about administrative stuff. But I think that now we've actually, in terms of projects, when we first started, we were just... Our first album was we have no music to play, so we have to write music to play.
So you're busy writing, yeah.
Right, and so it was that was really just about developing a repertoire where there was none before. The second album, you saw us really starting to think a little bit more artfully about what we were doing, and now that it's not really about sort of like pumping out shows and like just tracks, we can like think a little bit more artfully. So we've started working more on like a retreat basis for our artistic work. So like if we have a show coming up or a series of shows coming up, then we just set up actually what we call sort of like rehearsal retreat time, where it's like I'll be in New York and all we're not working on administrative stuff, we're not writing music, we're not talking about anything else. We just like lock ourselves away for 4 or 5 days and in a really concentrated and focused way.
Wow, that's great.
Just like rehearse what we know that we have coming up. And we do the same thing for composing now too. And that has really allowed us, like when we see a piece, like right now we're working on a piece that's going to premiere in 2020, so we were really able to work back a couple years, and you know, we had our first writing retreat in July of 2018, and so and we I think have
one next month.
Yes, maybe four or 5 more coming up, and so like between now and when the show will premiere, so it just makes us be a lot more organized. We have to do a lot more longer term planning, but I kind of find what's really great about that is that like before we were like, okay, we got to have rehearsal, but we have to have a meeting, and now we got to talk about this, and like
we gotta book this show.
It was just like too many things happening. There was a lot of multitasking happening, and I think now we probably like I don't know what you would say the ratio is to like how much we meet now versus how much I mean, like before we used to meet when we were both in New York, we met on a daily basis basically. So
I mean, we were basically neighbors.
You live next to each other, right?
Yeah. We live 5 blocks away.
Right, so you don't have to worry about that subway commute or anything.
So it's very easy.
So now we don't see each other every day anymore, but when we do see each other,
you really maximize on your time.
Focused, and that's helpful.
And purposeful too.
Right, and that type of planning has to be. I mean, you have to be pretty regimented and very organized. You both seem to be similar in that way. You both are, similar in your innovative thinking and really being kind of entrepreneurs in your own. I think it's fascinating that you both are that way, and you both come from such very different backgrounds in music. Allison, you said you're self-taught basically until you were 15.
Until I was 15.
Yeah, and then
in my early years.
Yeah.
Not to say, I mean, I had band in school, so I definitely had that type of encouragement and mentorship, but I didn't have flute instruction for real until about 15 years old. Yeah.
Well, I can relate to that too, because I feel like I kind of started a little bit later like that, being serious at least.
Right.
And it's different when you're just doing it kind of for fun or teaching yourself versus you're deciding it's going to be a career path, because you feel like you might have missed out where some people might have started very seriously or competitively early.
I had years of catching up to do.
Yeah.
Like, for real. So in a lot of ways it was, a little kind of like, oh gosh, am I going to even be able to do this? Am I crazy? But it was very motivating too, because once I decided to, once I realized, I really love doing this and I really want to do it well, so I need some help. I put myself in a situation where I was surrounded by other people like that, and it was very inspiring because it showed me like how much work I had to do, but like what was possible and all of that. So it was a little scary, but it worked out, I guess.
Yeah.
It
did. Yeah, here we are now.
There was a lot of catching up I had to do for years.
I feel like it's like a flute personality though.
Yeah, right? We're all kind of that, maybe type A is what people say.
Yes.
Jennifer
Don't you feel that way?
I don't know if people know this, but Jennifer Higdon was originally a flutist. And obviously she has a humongous career as a composer now, but she didn't start playing. I think she told me she didn't start playing until she was like 17 or 18. She'd like had no private lessons, had no composition lessons, had done nothing, and basically every single teacher was like, you're gonna be like, there's no way you could catch up to me. You're gonna be a failure. And she was like, actually, I'm gonna be just fine. I know, but it is. I feel like it's a funny thing to find. Like, the more flutists you find, or you look behind an organization, you're like, gosh, this is a really like awesome arts organization. Who's running this? Or,
right.
It's usually a flutist.
Flute players. Yeah.
So true. What is that about us?
I don't know.
It's like the chicken or the egg. Is it like the flute made us this way, or
are we just this way naturally?
We are that way? Right?
We'll never figure it out.
I know.
But conversely, Nathalie, you started at Juilliard when you were 10, so you kind of grew up there.
Yeah.
What's the joke that you were born in the lobby?
Yeah.
That's like, that's like
I was
ongoing.
just there yesterday, and I was like, here we go again.
Oh my goodness, that's so
Memories.
And they love her too. They keep drawing her back because she's done so much.
Yeah.
Like, please inspire our students all the time, and she's like, please let me go.
Well, I think it's kind of cool though that you can both have these different experiences, but like you said, in the end, we're all here together anyway. So do you think it is more of your personality and who you surround yourself with more than maybe the conservatory you go to or even your teacher?
It's like, look, I mean, I think to me, I value my education from Juilliard so much. I know that I had a big head start. You know what I mean? Like, I'd already played my first concerto at Lincoln Center by the time I was 11.
Wow.
Which is crazy.
Yeah.
So it's like, yeah, the training is great. It's wonderful. But I was also telling somebody yesterday, it's like, you're at Juilliard and you're like, I got a Juilliard, I'm so fancy. And then you leave, you graduate, and you realize that you're like, I'm also now like in my early 20s living in New York.
Yeah.
Broke like everybody else.
Right.
And it's honestly the people who we see who are really successful, it's like, it's not about actually being the best player. There are very few of us for whom our career happened simply because we were the best player. It's also that you were a great person to work with and that you had the drive to get it done and that you committed to something. And I think that...
And you get things done.
Yeah, that you actually are accomplishing
through.
anything.
Yeah.
I think, you can find... I know plenty of people who are extremely talented, who, their talent is really unmatched. But if they don't have the drive and they're not organized and they're a terrible person to work with, I know people who are much less talented who are much more successful than them. So I think, at the end of the day, it's like, of course, get the best training you can possibly get. And certainly, I mean, it's like, Carol Winsense was my teacher. She's still a mentor of mine. We still talk. I still get, professional guidance from her. And I value that. I really do. But I think that, at the end of the day, if you don't have the drive to get something done, it doesn't matter how great you are.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I think I lucked out also in terms of just the teachers I ended up working with. I mean, my first real serious teacher was Mary Bartow when I was 16 actually. So that was my second year of lessons, and she still teaches at Manus Pre-College.
That's where I met her, and I studied with her for a little.
Great.
Yeah.
Oh, you did?
Yeah.
Okay, so I had
and
her
for
her
flute choir, I think, is what she was coaching at the time.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think she still does that too. And she's just a real trainer.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And she's exactly what I needed. And in retrospect, I don't think I realized that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But she's exactly what I needed. She was like, okay, we're correcting all of these problems, and she really got me into gear. And then I moved on and I studied with Tara Helen O'Connor, who completely changed me had me thinking more as an artist rather just a flute player. Right. So studying with her was amazing as well. So I lucked out in that way because I think it is important who you work with also. In terms of making sure it's a good match, someone who is actually giving you what you need, and trying to understand who you are as a player, trying to help you find your sound. So I don't want to take for granted the value of the teachers that I did eventually have, because they had a profound impact on me, and they still do. I still call them to this day oh my god,
they come to our shows. I just did a show in September, and my teacher from the music advancement program at Juilliard came. I mean, it's she was my flute teacher when I was 10.
Yeah.
We were just emailing recently also with my high school band director.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. So it's amazing the impact that these music teachers can have on us. And Carol's still a big mentor for Flutronix. She's been on Team Flutronix.
She's fantastic. Yeah.
She's great. So definitely value those mentors for sure.
And now Nathalie and Allison want to pay it forward and inspire the next generation of young musicians by continuing to push the boundaries of what is expected from the flute. Their works are often politically charged, and Flutronix has performed at the anti-inaugural ball of the Dimena Center, Planned Parenthood, and raised funds for ACLU. There is a unifying theme in all they do to relate to their audience, and they have an open dialogue about the important role it can play in everyday life. Your group definitely highlights flute in a different way as well, some new genres and some new sounds and styles. What do you think the flute offers to different genres of music? Because it isn't heard quite often. You don't put on the radio and hear flute in hip hop usually, or in rock, or anything like that. What do you think are the benefits of having flute in this kind of repertoire?
It's a funny thing because you know what, I'm always like, the strings and the brass get all the
They
glory.
do, yeah.
Whenever I
know.
see Beyonce on tour, you're like, great, good job,
Right.
you had 14 strings on stage, good for you.
And it's lucky for the people that get to go on tour with her. That's a great gig. Like, where are the flute gigs like that?
Exactly.
Yeah.
But it's also, it's also the hip hop producers or the like rock and roll players who are like, you know what, let's use that flute sample. That was so amazing. I'm like, but nobody wants to take us on tour. Right.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, it's just like, it's a really versatile instrument. You know what I mean? I really feel that genuinely that we had, like, I just did a composer reading last night with the New York Youth Symphony. And it was interesting to see, it's like they're young composers, so they're sort of like, I heard the flute can do this and I heard the flute can do that. But It was great also for me to be able to be like, maybe the sound you're looking for is actually this, and like open them up to like a completely different sound that we're able to create. And so I think it's super flexible. It's it's solid melodic instrument that lends itself to many different timbres and styles. Also, it fits and it's also just like, look at the world of instruments, right? You look at almost every culture has a flute,
Has a version of a flute.
exactly.
Yeah.
And so it's sort of like there's a reason for that, I think. So
yeah, absolutely. And it's a very vocal instrument, right? So I think it's just I think we're making some progress in that way, but I think we have to work towards kind of fighting the stereotype that comes with playing the flute.
Yes.
Because I think I've met a lot of people who don't know much about music, and when they think of the flute, they think like shrill, or I recently, a few years ago, I had a friend, a new friend that came to one of our shows, and that was one of the comments that he made. He was like, I really liked it. It wasn't shrill or anything. Like, you know what I mean? It wasn't like, because he had like an idea in his head. Right, that like, flute is always like this high bird-like trilling kind of doo-doo-doo sound, you know what I mean? So I think one of the things I really appreciate about the work that we do in Flutronix and also otherwise is that we kind of try to like debunk that a little bit, by taking it to other places and demonstrating other like sound possibilities that the instrument can make in different contexts. So I could be wrong, but I haven't heard a lot of that in these more like popular genres, like the use of the flute in a more like using like extended techniques or just like different sounds, you know what I mean? Or like using it in a percussive way.
Exactly.
Which I think the flute is awesome as like a percussive type instrument, right? So, I mean, hopefully that'll change, but I think that's kind of what's been maybe missing so far. There just hasn't been enough exposure to the range of possibilities that the flute can do.
And you also don't do, you do some acoustic stuff, but you play a lot with electronics. What are the realities of combining electronic style with the flute and playing electronically?
Yeah.
It's like, you gotta think of it as like a really bad ensemble member, essentially. It's because like,
they don't follow us.
Yeah.
They're in their own world. Not listening.
If you make a mistake, they don't go with you.
Right.
You're
on your own.
So yeah, it's like in terms of working with fixed media or even like live processed media, it's a challenge. There's a lot of coordination involved, and also takes a lot of nuance. I think we're still really even just like developing our palette in terms of how we incorporate it. I think that I'll speak for myself. I come from like a very heavy, like deep love for drum and bass music as a kid. Like I just like lived for different styles of electronic music. And I think when I first started writing, that was like my go-to was like, I want it to sound like that with flutes. Like this is what I always wanted it to be. And I think now I've like these past couple projects that I've been working on, and our newest project that we're working on is really about sort of like actually taking a step back from the electronics, looking at them and seeing like, okay, like if we're thinking structurally in a totally different way, like how can we make this be a better ensemble member pretty much? Like how can
use it to your advantage?
Exactly.
More? Yeah.
So and doing a lot more live work in that way too, which I think is like has been, we actually just performed the first little excerpt of our newest piece called Discourse, and that's like I thought it was really fun to see that at the end of the program, just sort of the trajectory of like where we sort of started. Here are some of our earlier music, and like this is where we're at now. You hear a real evolution in that.
Right.
Yeah, and it's elevated the experience of the show as well.
Yeah,
which is nice.
You were talking about Discourse. That's through Carolina Performing Arts. That's a residency that you have with them for 2 years, right?
Yeah.
That's an exciting project.
It's amazing. It's like both terrifying and also like extremely exciting. So Carolina Performing Arts is the presenting entity at the University of North Carolina in Chapel Hill. And we got a call from them, I guess, last year.
Yeah, maybe about a year ago.
And, I was sort of like, is this email real? Because I mean, they're a pretty big deal presenting organization. So we had a call with Amy Collings-Russell, who is sort of one of the folks in charge down there, and she said, I think you guys are great. I think you're doing really interesting work. I wonder if you would want to do something down here. And we had really, like as I said, we've been working on this like sort of longer term artistic planning, so we had really committed to doing this project. The project itself is our first, site specific work, community engagement oriented piece. It's really the first time that we're like involving so many other voices into our process. It's certainly the first time that we've worked this way compositionally together. And so we had been thinking about this project in different iterations for years
for a while.
At that point. And so I was like, she's never going to go for this, but I'm going to say it because this is who we are.
That's your thing,
we could say we could come and play all the old stuff, and maybe we will, but this is what we're doing. And so we told her about this idea that we had for creating an evening length work that was really about engaging communities in conversation with one another, and in a way using art as a means for sort of processing the times that we're living in right now.
And will all this research and engagement with the community influence the work and shape it as well? Is this like a live composition sort of process that will take place over the years and then come into fulfillment at the end?
Right. So what we're doing essentially is engaging in the process and then recording a lot of these conversations, testimonies of people's personal experiences as American citizens, as immigrants, as like people just existing in America, really. And we'll be sort of highlighting these individual narratives and taking that text and bringing it into the work. So for us as composers, it's really a process of setting text in as many interesting ways as we can figure out or think of doing that. But essentially using a musical framework to highlight individual narratives. So at the end of the show, I mean, the excerpt that we've already created actually accesses an interview that we sourced from the Southern Oral History program. And so it's just really us. That was really a practice in sort of like sampling this man's words and then also setting his text to song with the flutes and also electronics, live drums. And so that's that. But I think some of it will also be like for each city that we do this in, like Chapel Hill is the first city that we're doing it in. We're also now talking about expanding to several other cities to sort of replicate the process. You'll also hear stories like direct from the community itself. And so there'll be an evening length performance, and also in Chapel Hill we're talking about doing a sound installation that will be sort of like a sort of, what do you call it, partner piece to the live show itself, so that people in the community can come and hear these narratives and potentially engage with video and photos to really get a sense of their community. And it is about community. It's sort of about tying us all together, and we found that it was so much easier to do that through individual narratives than by like talking about a group of people, or like it's so much harder to contextualize. But once you meet someone personally, hearing their story means something.
The most influential.
That's like why you're doing podcasts. Hearing from people about their lives is actually like really interesting and makes you see them in a totally different way.
I actually read that was the only way to really change someone's mind. When you're having an argument or a discussion and you really clash, you can't just keep saying the same statement pieces over and over again. It's a personal story or some way of showing how it actually directly affects you in a personal way, or vice versa for the other person. And then when you actually see the human experience behind what they're talking about, then you can relate, and then you're more apt to maybe change your mind. Maybe not, but it's like the only way, shown through research, that you can actually start to see from each other's point of view.
Exactly.
So
I think, and that's the thing. It's like at the end of the day, maybe you're going to change minds, but I do think even if you don't, at the very least, like I know that I've already engaged with some of these stories and narratives in a way that I'm like, I don't agree with a lot of what has been said, but I actually now can understand how you can feel that way.
Right.
And that makes me like, you just ultimately have like a little bit more respect for people when it comes to that, when you can sort of piece together the how of why, even if you don't, it's not, you don't agree, or it's not for you, but you see it and you can understand why they feel that way.
You both have been on faculty at the Juilliard Advancement Program, which brings mentoring and serious education, music education, to children in New York City's 5 boroughs with diverse backgrounds, underrepresented in classical music. How did you guys get involved in that program, and what about working with those young people kind of gave you hope for the future of music?
Well, I was a student in the music advancement program, which was like awesome. I mean, honestly, I could not say that I would be here today without that program having existed. And so it was a no-brainer for me when they called me about potentially teaching privately in the program. Of course, I would go back, because honestly, I could have been a kid that nobody ever noticed. You know what I mean? I could have been somebody who like played the flute a little bit and no one really ever took me under their wing or gave me an opportunity. And it's so funny when you think about that. Like people are always like, oh, how'd you start playing flute? And I really started playing kind of randomly. Nobody in my family is a musician, although music is like a big part of our family. Like no one is a professional musician. My parents had no idea. They immigrated here from Haiti. Like nobody is playing flute in the right. So like, they were sort of just like, and so here you had, like for me, it was actually the orchestra teacher at my elementary school who said, Juilliard has this program. She should audition for it. My parents were like, oh, okay, sure. And I was like, what's an audition? I didn't know what that is. Like I had no idea. And so, and again, like we've talked about, the private teacher I had in that program is somebody with whom I have a relationship with to this day. And I value these educators so much, because there's 100% no way that I would be sitting here talking to you today had they not identified something special and important in me, and had they not made me feel like I could be somebody special and important. And so, of course, like it means so much to me to go back and do that, because you just don't know, like what if we're not out there, looking for these kids,
advocating for someone else,
exactly,
who's
like
gonna get lost.
What would I be doing with my life even? I have no idea. Like I would have been maybe not even in music at all, who knows, but like so that to me is like really important. And also, again, this idea of sort of like having somebody see you, like kids, I think especially sort of get overlooked. Like you got to just do what the adults say and you sort of do whatever. And I think when you work with somebody in a private lesson situation at that age, it's funny because you gain like these huge relationships with them. You get to know them because you're really spending maybe more personal time with them than almost anybody else. You know what I mean? And so the idea that you could have that kind of impact in somebody's life, and just for like an hour a week or 30 minutes a week, to just say to that person, like, I see you, and like, yes, we're here working on music, but you're a wonderful person, so we're also here to just like celebrate you and try to make you be the best version of you that you can be. And so I really do take a lot of pride in that. And so I loved and I do miss teaching in the music advancement program, because Allison will tell you that it's like almost weekly where I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm trying to like get this thing together for this student and try to do this for this student, and I want to really be able to help them in this way, and like, your heart goes into
it. You get really invested.
Yeah, they're real people. Like, like their futures might actually depend on you being the person to sort of stand up for them.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I absolutely loved my students at math. I still, I'm not there any longer. Last year was my last year, but I'm still in close contact with several of them. I will say that one of my favorite things about that community is just that, first and foremost. Like, there is a safe feeling in that community amongst the students and the faculty and the family, which I thought was really special. And I had a really talented group of students, really hardworking, and some of them had, in terms of like resources, a harder time than others. And we all know, like, this journey of studying music at this level is very costly.
Yes.
The lessons, the instruments, and just the dedication that the parents have to put in, the time commitment. It's really a lot and can be very challenging for lots of people. So it's really a privilege, that we have these opportunities, right? So being able to help them kind of navigate through those things, for example, and there were some resources provided, like through Juilliard, that made a lot of things possible, like financially, for example, that otherwise wouldn't have been. And for me, that was like the greatest thing about working there, like working together, trying to figure out, okay, so-and-so got into, Interlochen. How can we, like, raise the money to, like, get them, you know what I mean? Like, that kind of thing. Or so-and-so needs a new instrument. Like, how can we, like, how can we partner up and figure it out? So I really appreciated that effort that I found. And I think everybody that I worked with there was really very much on the same page in terms of advocating for the students, and really trying to make it happen for them, because they put the work in. They really want to be there, and they're really dedicated, so it's like, okay, we have to figure this out. So for me, that was the most rewarding thing about the program, other than just the students themselves. Like, I miss them tremendously, and really, they're like the flute students. I brought them here once. Right?
Yeah.
They're like a real fun, bright, talented group of
enthusiastic,
kids.
for sure.
Enthusiastic, you know what I mean? Some of them, it was like a whole new world to them, like coming into that building. Some of them didn't even know what Juilliard was,
I definitely didn't when I went.
Right.
I was like, my mom's like, you're going to take an audition. I'm like, what's that? She's like, you're just going to go in the room and play. And I'm like, where is it? She's like, Juilliard. I'm like, what's that?
Yeah, exactly.
That's good. Sometimes not knowing is better, right?
And I thought that too, because I definitely had one student in particular who just had no idea what any of this meant. She just knew, like, her band teacher recommended it. She just knew that she loved playing. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it was an opportunity to, like, play.
Keep that, right? Keep that forever.
Yeah, exactly.
I know.
And it's so funny because, like, to this day, like, she would perform, no nerves, no nothing. Like, you know what I mean? Just, like, the confidence would just, like, come alive, when she would perform. That kind of thing. You know what I mean? Which is just really, I don't know, I just thought that was just really a special kind of thing about her. And some of the other kids, too. Same thing.
I think also, I mean, it's so, like, that program started, actually, the now former president of Juilliard, Joe Polisi, who I also have, great, I really, like, value him as a person that I've got to be in contact with in my life. Started that program at a time where a lot of music programs were being cut from public schools. And that's painful. I mean, it's wonderful that Juilliard had that response, and it's wonderful that that program is still thriving, and that it came out of that, and that one of our most important musical institutions chose to take it upon themselves to respond in that way. Because I do think, at the end of the day, it's so not about any of those kids becoming a professional. Like, great that happened for me. Great that it has happened for others and will continue to, but I think it's more about, like, the arts is a really amazing way to teach discipline and teamwork and commitment, and I think that giving people, especially people who come from potentially really challenging home situations or life situations, giving them the opportunity to have an outlet from that is, like, it's so important.
Yeah, and
really,
I think people forget music can make great human beings. Yeah. So it's not just what you just said. It's not about being musicians, and that's not why you should continue to study. music or be involved.
Right.
It's just to make you a better person.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess we both missed the program. We're still friends of math, they call it.
We are.
Friends of math, So, we'll always be friends and family of math.
Yeah.
And have a special connection there.
Well, that's a very inspirational note to end on.
Yeah.
That's great. Thank you guys so much for coming in. It's really, really nice getting to know both of you and chatting.
Yeah,
Thanks for having us.
Stay up to date on all the projects and outreach programs that Flutronix is involved in, and listen to all their music by going to their website, flutronix.com. Thank you to Flutronix. Music for this episode is from their albums and includes She Is, They Ain't You, and Lifelines. This has been an episode of Flute Unscripted. This podcast is sponsored by Flute Center of New York. Visit their website at flutesforsale.com for the largest selection of new and pre-owned instruments. Use this season's promo code LISTEN for a special deal of $50 off any purchase of $4.99 or more. You can follow the Flute Center on Instagram and like them on Facebook to stay up to date on the latest events and masterclasses. Special thanks to our owner Phil Unger, the Flute Center team, and Stefan Huskoldson for our theme music.